This is an interactive class, especially if you have children. It is geared toward children. Please unmute yourself. If you want to turn your video on, you're more than welcome to, but we are being recorded, so please keep that in mind. It is fun to kind of cook with the kids together, so if you would like, please do so. So today we are going to be making oat cakes, and oat cakes are one of those things that almost every kind of culture had at some point in time. This is not a period recipe, but it's fairly close to what we would assume that King Alfred would have been maybe not watching so close, and so they got burnt. So we're going to put our ingredients together, and then while we're baking our oat cakes, I am going to move to another room, and we're going to talk about what made Alfred great and how did he burn the cakes. So first part of any type of cooking, you want to make sure that your hands are washed. So please make sure you have your hair pulled up. You have washed your hands. I've washed mine a couple of times, so I'm not going to do a super good job, but you guys know how to do this now. Everybody is in on the hand washing. So the first ingredient that goes into our oat cakes is going to be, and I'm going to move the camera down here so you guys can see actually what I'm making. The first thing that's going to go in is a stick and a half of butter. And your stick and a half of butter does need to be melted. So I'm going to suggest, especially with kids, that you go ahead and melt your butter right now. We'll add it in later, but if you melt it now in the microwave, it gives it a few seconds to cool. We will be using our hands to mix up the oat mixture. So we want to make sure that that's cool and nobody gets their fingers burned when they're in the process of doing that. The next thing that's going to go in is going to be our oat flour. Now you don't have to use oat flour. You can use any type of flour that you happen to have. I've not tried this with any type of gluten-free, but I would assume it would work about the same because there's other stuff that binds all of this together. I'm going to be mixing. Go ahead.
We should note that all the ingredients are in the chat.
Yes. And you're just going to put a cup of those into your mixing bowl. I'm actually going to use a 9x11 because I think it's a little bit easier to see. The next thing that goes in is our oats. And I am using Scottish porridge oats. You can use any type of oats. I have used like Quaker Quickset oats. They work the same. Haven't noticed much of a difference. These are just kind of cut differently, so the texture is a little different. And we're going to add that in. Now, our last two dry ingredients that are going to go in is the cinnamon and the salt. Now, I've already measured mine out, but you're going to need a half a teaspoon of salt and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. Cinnamon is optional. I do like it. I'm actually going to be using dried cherries in this one, and I like cinnamon and cherry together. So it's just my preference. I've also used nutmeg and some other different spices in it. It's very, very easy to add to your taste. All right, so we've got all of our dry ingredients together, and we're just going to give those a little mix. And kids, you should be getting your hands in on this. All right. Next thing we're going to add, going back to our butter, we're just going to pour that entire bowl of butter in there. Butter is one of the best things around. The last thing that's going to go in is going to be, or next to last, is our honey. And you're going to need 6 tablespoons of honey. And yes, this gets super sticky to mix. It's a lot of fun. Then we're going to add in whatever dried fruit you want. You don't have to add in fruit. And of course, there we go. You can use raisins. I've considered using chocolate chunks with this, just because I think that would be super delicious. They're kind of like an oatmeal cookie. And I probably should have chopped these beforehand, because they're kind of big, but it'll be all right. Sort of eyeballing that 2/3 there. Okay, so now we have all of our ingredients. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna mix this. You probably want to keep your flour a little close. Sometimes it needs a little bit more flour added as we go. It's just one of those things that I found. And we're going to mix it all together. So probably at some point in time make a really good facial mask also. And mine's pretty runny. You can kind of tell how it's spreading back out, I think. So I'm gonna just shake in a little bit more of the oat flour. You kind of want to get it to a Play-Doh consistency is what we're looking for. Wow, it's really not wanting to stay together. Well, that's what, you know, recipes are all about, experimenting a little bit. Okay, so that's about the consistency we want it to be. And we're gonna take it and we're gonna put it in our hands and we're gonna make little, yeah, it's still a little runny. I'm not sure why this is so runny. It didn't do this the last time. Of course, right? So, mix a little bit more. This is a fun part anyways. All right, now we're about the right consistency. We want it to look about like that. And we're just gonna put these onto a baking sheet, maybe about 3 inches apart, about palm size. And of course, I did forget to mention, if you haven't already started preheating your oven, you need to preheat it to 350. Now, back in Alfred's day, they would have made these more than likely in a skillet, if they had a skillet, or they would have made it on the hearth. So a lot of times you hear these referred to as hearth cakes or ash cakes, because they might have gotten a little bit of ash in them as they were cooking. But they do burn super easy, as you're gonna learn when I tell the story. So you do have to kind of keep an eye on them. 10 minutes is, and my oven's preheated. Usually does it. It might need up to 12, depending on how thick you make your cakes. I think I got enough just for one last little one here. These are really yummy for breakfast or a snack. We like to drizzle honey on there. So I'm gonna wash my hands here real quick. We like to drizzle honey on ours. You can crumble them over the top of yogurt. It's really yummy. Pretty much anything that you would do with an oatmeal cookie, you can do with these. Now, let me show you guys my oat cakes. This is what they should pretty much look like. Now, I'm gonna go stick these in the oven. So I'm gonna walk away from the camera just for a second. Okay, so everybody wants to get those in the oven, and you're gonna put it in for 10 minutes at 350 again, just in case you need to hear that. And we are gonna go into the other room so that we can sit down and talk about Alfred and why he was so great. So you can take a little journey with me here. Okie dokie. Now make sure that somebody is paying attention or you've got the timer where you can hear it because the oatcakes will burn and then they won't be so tasty. Now, King Alfred. Alfred was the king of Wessex a long, long time ago in England. And if you don't really know where Wessex is, I've got a little map here I can show you. So this is England. Down here at the bottom, that is where King Alfred lived. And King Alfred lived with his mother and his father in a castle there. And he had 5 other brothers and sisters. So Alfred really didn't think that he would ever become king, not growing up at least. So he did a lot more things like playing and learning and didn't have to study all the things of war that maybe his brothers were doing. One day at Christmas, his mother came out to court and said, I have a challenge for you children. And all the children gathered around and she held out to them a book of poems. Now, back in medieval times, back when Alfred was around, they didn't have PlayStations, they didn't have TVs. And about the only form of maybe imaginative entertainment that they got was from books. And Alfred did love books. He was a big fan of books. Now, the problem was Alfred was so young, he really hadn't started reading yet. And he had to have a scribe read to him. But he was learning his letters. And his mother looked at all the children and said, the first one that can recite back the poem book to me gets it. It will be theirs. And Alfred was determined that he was going to be the one to get the book. So he went to his scribe and said, Scribe, I need to memorize all of these poems to win the book. And the scribe said, okay. So the scribe every day read to Alfred until he memorized all of the poems in the book. And he actually memorized them before anybody else. So that night, after he had memorized the last one, he went to court with his father and they were having their big dinner. And he told his mother that he had memorized it. And all the other kind of children, I think they probably laughed because they were like, how did Alfred learn? He couldn't have memorized them. He can't read. And he stood there in front of everyone and read back the entire book of poems and won the book of poems from his mother. Now, unfortunately, the rest of Alfred's childhood kind of went downhill. The Vikings started to invade England. And unfortunately, during the course of that, Alfred lost all of his brothers. And the next thing that he knows, he is the king of Wessex. And he's trying to make peace with the Vikings, and it's not really working. And he really doesn't want the Vikings there, not ruling them. He would like to rule his people. So there is a war going on. And one Christmas, just kind of like the one that we heard about, he's sitting in his castle. And they're celebrating Christmas. And all of a sudden, the Vikings attack. Because, well, this Viking guy that was leading the attacks, he was pretty clever. And he knew that he might be able to catch King Alfred by surprise if he attacked on Christmas. So Alfred was able to escape with a couple people, his family and some of their close friends, but they had nowhere to go. Unfortunately, the war had caused most of the villages to burn down in the area. And so they kind of went to this swamp in the winter and they were trying to survive. They lived in caves or if people would take them in. So one day, Alfred is out hunting because, you know, they don't have any food. So he does have to hunt for their food. They have to be able to eat something. And he's cold and he's weary and he's just really down in the dumps about this whole situation with the Vikings. And how is he going to make things right? And as he's walking along, he comes to a hut in a cold forest and he sticks his head in and then he asks the lady of the house if he could come in and rest and just warm up by the fire. And of course, this lady couldn't and wouldn't know that this was actually King Alfred walking into her living room, gonna sit down and, hang out by the fire. So she says, sure. She's like, I have some other things I need to do. Can you keep an eye on my oat cakes? Oh, so the oat cakes were there on the hearth and they were cooking. So Alfred, as he warmed himself by the fire, was watching the oat cakes cook. Unfortunately, Alfred kind of got lost in his thoughts. Yeah, we all kind of do that. He was a little bit of daydreaming about what was he going to do to fix this problem. And just as the lady walks back into the room, he realizes that the oat cakes are burning. And she looks at him and she's not very nice. She's like, what are you doing? She's like, you can't even watch these oat cakes without burning, And he's like, ugh. And it was just another depressing thing that happened to him. But as he was sitting there looking into the flames of the fire, he sort of had an idea. He was thinking about all the villages that had burnt down by the Vikings, because unfortunately that was a thing that they did back in the day. If they wanted to take your village, they probably would burn down your house. So not all the common people had a place to go, like a castle to live. So he had this idea, and he decided that he was going to build forts around the area for all of the common people to come and live in, and that he could train them to be fighters, and that they could help him fight the Vikings. Well, Alfred's plan worked, and he created a fort system across that area that I showed you on the map. And the common people came together and they helped Alfred drive out the Vikings. Now, after he got the Viking problem taken care of, and he did that very cleverly, by the way. He beat them in battle, and then he was able to make peace with them and had them promise that they would not come back. So after that problem was dealt with, Alfred decided to build a navy. So he started building a navy, and he had the forts, and they started minting money for people to use. And then he decided, and don't forget, because Alfred did love books, he had people start writing books. And that's what gives us the Saxon Chronicles, which is one of the reasons, this big book, see, big, huge Saxon Chronicles. And that's one of the reasons that people think that Alfred is great. He put together the forts, he created the navy, and he started documenting history. He just unfortunately wasn't a very good cook. So now your oat cakes should probably be about done if you want to go check on them. And that is actually the end of our class. Mine are done, but they're going to have to cool for a second before I can eat them. So I'll post pictures of mine. If everybody will post pictures of theirs that they made on, I'll do a post on the Mid-Realm page and people can post them if they'd like. So, all right. Any questions from anybody?
I am not seeing any.
All right, well then we can call it. Thank you everybody for attending.